One of the things I really like about a Maiden day is when the motor starts easily. This is a new EME 60, and I've got maybe an hour of run time on it in the yard. And it's been very consistent right out of the box. I haven't touched the mixture screw yet. I also have an EME 70 twin that I fly, and that one hasn't been adjusted at all either. This motor will stumble if you try gassing it while it's still cold. Let it warm up just a little bit and it runs fine the rest of the day. Before I put the wing on, a couple of friends and I went over this plane front to back to make sure I didn't do nothing really stupid. We found a couple of lock nuts that are loose on clevises, but those are soldered on one end so they couldn't turn anyway. But we tightened those up because it makes it more solid. I'm using a petroleum-based gas oil mix of 32 to 1. And for some of the braking time, I'm going to use a Vest 23A prop. This EME 60 hasn't even thought about running hot yet, so we may go to a different prop later on. But I think the 23A is going to be plenty of prop to pull this plane around with authority. Before the first takeoff, I drove the plane around on the field a little bit just to see what it was like. The grass hasn't really woken up yet this year, so it's a little bumpy. The tail wheel bounces off a lot of that. It does get a little tippy towards the front a little bit, but during the takeoff when you get on the power, it just straightens right out and lifts off quickly. And this is the first takeoff. I find out that it needs a little bit of up elevator and some right aileron, but it's not bad at all. And we can see that the motor prop combination is just fine. This is about a 2/3 throttle pass. The response to control input really isn't sluggish. It is a lot slower than, say, a 3D plane, but you never feel like you don't have control over it. All our control surfaces are set to what the instruction manual calls for. Maybe a minute or two into this first flight, the wind kicked up and it's pretty much diagonal across the runway, coming from my back. This P47 came out weighing just a little over 21 pounds. And it does seem to handle the wind pretty good. It gets bounced around a little bit now and then, but it's not bad at all. Flying a camouflage plane on a fully cloudy day means staying close to the field is a pretty good idea. I made a lot of these little flybys just to see how the plane looked and keep it in the area. Whenever I made in a plane, as soon as I get it where it's flying stable and predictably, I start making landing approaches just to see what the plane feels like then. This first pass is just slow it up with only the wheels down. I wanted to see how it handles when it's a little bit dirty, just how much effect the wheels do have on it. And you can see as it approaches the field, the plane pretty much doesn't care if the wheels are out or not. And again, at the reduced speed, the handling is still right there. On this pass, I put the flaps down, and the wind is still coming from behind me, kind of diagonally across the runway. But the P47 doesn't handle it bad at all. The wind at our field has a real nasty habit of changing directions entirely while you're up in the air. As soon as I pulled up out of the last landing pass, I could feel the wind now coming from my left, so I just went right back around and come in from the other direction. The runway runs uphill from this direction, and landing from this way can get a little bumpy near the end of the runway, but it smooths out the last half. And the P47 handled it just fine. I hadn't mixed any down elevator in with the flaps, so I was having to push the nose down on all of these approaches. The flaps are really effective on this plane. And right there it caught a good gust of wind. Kind of surprised me how easily it corrected when it got that gust of wind under it. Even going pretty slow, it listens to the controls very well. I set this approach up a little farther out because I was going to go ahead and try and land it this time. And it came in and handled it very well. It's nice and stable and landed pretty gentle. And I think we'll call that a successful Maiden. The only thing that we noticed on this landing is that the plane seemed to stop pretty quickly. The wheels are good and free, and I think maybe we need to work on the alignment to find out what it likes best there. I put 4 flights on the P47 on the first Maiden day, so I decided to bring it in overnight and check for nuts and bolts being loose. I'm usually pretty thorough when I check a plane over like this, but we'd find out later that I missed one screw anyway. Checking a plane like this doesn't take very long at all, and it's a really good idea to see if anything's starting to loosen up. Here I'm getting ready to take off for the first flight on day number 2 of the Maiden series. And this is where I find out what screw I missed when I checked things over earlier this morning. The cameraman even zooms in so you can get a better view of this. That's the one.
Come on.
The right wing is so low because it popped the retract out of the wing. But that and the busted prop is the only damage we had. I'd find out later that the fix wasn't all that bad, and I did a story on that too that you'll see in the how-to section. Keep an eye on my site because there's a couple more Maiden days coming.